All right, let's just dive right in. Today, we're going to talk about how one of the absolute messiest character histories in all of comics got turned into this really profound philosophical journey. It's a story all about creating who you are from the wreckage of a past that was never even real to begin with.
So, I want you to really hold on to that question, because when it comes to Vampirella, her tangled, totally contradictory history, it's not a mistake. As we're about to see, it is the entire point.
Okay, so let's start with a big problem. For decades, Vampirella's backstory was it was a mess. A famous puzzle of contradictions. The writer after writer came in, tried to solve, and honestly just kind of failed.
Now look, if you follow comics, you know that is a heavy statement. Comparing a character's history to Hawkman's, that's basically the industry's way of saying it's a completely unfixable, tangled-up disaster. So that's the scale of the problem we're dealing with here.
You see, it really just boiled down to two major, completely incompatible origins. In one story, she's this sci-fi alien, a refugee from a planet where blood flows in rivers. Cool. But then in the next story, she's the supernatural demonic daughter of the mythological Lilith. So which one is it? For years, the answer was just kind of both and neither.
And then, in 2019, a reboot comes along with this absolutely brilliant idea. It didn't try to fix the mess. No, instead, it reframed this entire broken history as a deliberate, cruel, and deeply personal lie. And here's how they did it. The architect of it all? Her own mother, Lilith, who's basically this ancient force of chaos who just loves destroying truth itself. Her tool? A magic mirror that she used to implant whatever origin story she felt like into her daughter's mind. And the result of all this? Vampirella became a living, breathing contradiction. A hero with a mind that was shattered into dozens of conflicting pasts, never knowing which one, if any, was the real one.
You know, there's actually a literary term for what the writers did here. It's called metacommentary. They took a real-world problem, decades of different writers and editorial changes, and they made it a core plot point inside the story. Lilith basically becomes a stand-in for every single writer who ever decided to change Vampirella's origin.
So the bottom line is this: the creative flaw, the bug in her continuity, was masterfully flipped into the source of her deepest psychological trauma. Her confusion wasn't a problem with the story anymore. Her confusion was the story. It's just an absolutely brilliant narrative move.
And this is where things start to get really deep. Because this whole deception, it wasn't just some clever plot twist. No. It created a very specific kind of psychological wound, one made entirely out of stories.
To really get what's going on inside her head, we can actually turn to this key philosophical idea from Nietzsche called ressentiment. It's this corrosive, deep-seated feeling of powerlessness and frustration that you get from being a passive object in your own life, like a pawn in someone else's game. This describes Vampirella's existential crisis perfectly. This quote right here from the comic, it just lays her pain bare. This is her, in therapy, trying to explain the wound. She's not just confused, She's suffering from this deep existential nausea because she has no idea who she actually is, only what she's been told she is over and over again.
But, as if that internal battle wasn't already enough, the story then introduces a villain who is the perfect external embodiment of her struggle. A bad guy who literally uses narrative chaos as a weapon.
So yeah, her deepest, most private fear, that she's nothing more than a jumble of random, conflicting stories, is about to become a real physical threat. This villain's name is the Continuist. And to get why he's so unique, you can kind of contrast him with a villain like Vrildox, who wants to force a single perfect order on the universe. The Continuist wants the exact opposite. He wants a universe of infinite, sensational, and totally meaningless stories. He wants absolute, total chaos.
His power is just terrifyingly abstract. I mean, he doesn't conquer cities. He literally steals their cohesion by attacking their shared story. So overnight, he can just inject 1,000 different histories into one place. One person wakes up in a city they believe was founded by Vikings, while their next-door neighbor is living in a city made entirely of clockwork. He dissolves shared reality itself.
What this means is that he is so much more than just a physical threat. He's a dark mirror held right up to her face, reflecting her deepest fear. He represents that terrifying possibility that she's right, that she really is nothing more than a random collection of stories with no true self at the center.
But confronting this personification of her trauma, it forces Vampirella to a breaking point, and ultimately it leads her to this profound philosophical resolution. She has to find an answer to his chaos, and in doing so, an answer to her own.
And the answer she finds is to become what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, or what the comic calls the self-begotten. She finally stops digging through the pile of lies trying to find that one true origin story. Instead, she just accepts the chaos and decides that she will be the sole author of her own identity from this moment on.
This single line from the comic just perfectly captures her entire transformation. She looks back at the tangled mess her mother made, and she doesn't see it as a tragedy anymore. She sees it as a comedy of errors. She's not a victim of her past, because her future is now entirely her own to create.
And that really just leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Her journey from being a character defined by a broken past to one defined by a self-created future, it kind of turns the whole story's theme back on us. It forces us to ask ourselves, if everything you thought defined you was suddenly stripped away, who would you choose to become?